This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today joined by my co-host, Arthur Parkinson, who, we both share a great passion for pelargoniums. So why don't you kick us off, Arthur, and tell us all why you love them, and then I'll back you up.
Well, I remember working at Nottingham Castle as an apprentice in the cafe quite a while ago now, and I remember finishing my shift and walking past very classic bedding plants in the summer. And one year they'd done pelargoniums, Attar of Roses, very fancy for Nottingham, but it was a real trendsetter that's catched on. And I remember just walking past this huge urn of them, and I took some home for the vase, actually, because I just loved the smell of them. And I remember sitting on the tram for half an hour, literally just smelling the most gorgeous fragrance. And then when I first visited your garden, you'd got them everywhere. And I think increasingly, both in terms of pot recipes and always in flower arrangements, it is foliage first. So when you find a foliage that gives you scent, it's such a joyful thing that's helpful to both the flowers and the look. And I just can't believe how much of a trendsetter they've become, particularly in the last 2 years. You can't walk into any makeup shop or fragrance shop without pelargoniums now being mentioned. It is incredible. I'd love to know the farm that they're all being grown at, because they must be absolutely billionaires by now. We should have done it.
Yeah, I think a lot of them actually. Well, in the perfume industry, I think a lot of them are grown in China. But
really?
No, I was walking around early this morning having a look at the pelargoniums because I knew we were going to chat about them. And we've got them in many different places in the garden here. And each time I sort of looked at it and thought, is this or that? And then Josie's so brilliant that she labels everything so carefully so I could check. And indeed they were. And each one that I looked at and took out the label reminded me of somebody. And that's what I think is so wonderful about them, is that you can take a tiny cutting off a pelargonium, you can root it to be its own plant within 4 to 5 weeks, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you've got this wonderful memory of either a holiday or a friend or, naughtily nicking a little cutting from a garden or whatever. Not encouraging everyone to do that too much, but they just are so easy. And then the other thing that is wonderful about them is they're, of course, drought tolerant, and you can bring them into the house and put them on the window ledges inside. And most of them are pretty happy, bought from the outside to the inside when the frosts come, let's say in November. And even if they die back in their tops and the green begins to look a bit unhealthy, you can just cut that back in sort of March, April time, and off they go again. So you've got a really easy houseplant, come scented leafed, come container plant, that is just so easy to do and so easy to propagate. So should we talk about propagating before we go on to varieties? So how would you recommend doing them, Arthur?
Well, it was interesting. As you know, I visit Chatsworth a lot, and one particular visit I was allowed to look into the off-show glass houses where they do tons and tons of pelargonium propagating. In fact, they've got a really good collection of regal pelargoniums, which are the ones that have the particularly profuse, very beautiful flowers, big flowers. And for most of us, we'll propagate, won't we, using normally a 9 centimetre pot, and we'll put all the little cuttings around the edge, and that's perfectly fine. But what they do at Chatsworth, because it's on big scale for plants both to sell and for the collection, the ongoing collection, is they use your classic technique of sewing, which is using the trays of Jiffy Sevens, which are those little coins in the helpful tray that fluff up like muffins.
Yeah.
And so they do them like that. So they get a whole tray, they soak it in water so all the little coins fluff up like muffins, so they're peat-free. And then into the little jiffies go about 3 cuttings each, and they go onto a heated bench.
3 each.
So,
Gosh.
yeah.
That's such a good tip. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So if you want to do a lot, that's how they do it at Chatsworth. Obviously, it's undercover and also on a heated bench. I mean, these pelargoniums are jostling between orchids and all kinds of wonderful exotic things. But you could copy that if you've got a greenhouse, by all means.
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you who are sort of more beginners, number 1 is you just want to take a little side shoot, ideally not flowering, off the mother plant. And you can either just sort of tear that off or cut it off. And always there's the highest concentration of rooting hormone just below a pair of leaves. So cut just below a pair of leaves. Then number 2, remove all the foliage that's going to be below the compost or the jiffy compost level. Number 3, pinch out the tip, which I always find really counterintuitive, because you would think that's where you want that for it to grow well, but you don't, because that creates apical dominance, and you want to remove apical dominance to encourage root dominance so that it then puts down the roots rather than shooting up to the skies. And number 4, you want to just remove any large foliage, and you can actually just cut them with scissors in half. But I mean, to add, as Arthur says, to put them in a jiffy, 3, and then on a heated bench, how fantastic is that? And genuinely, you should have rooting within a matter of weeks, and you'll know you have because you'll suddenly see new little axillary buds just emerging at the top. And at that point, just pop them on into their own individual pots, and you will have something that's looking really splendid in a few weeks. I mean, a couple of months, and you've got your own scented leaf or whatever pelargonium. So they couldn't be easier to grow and to propagate. So what are your favourites, Arthur?
Oh, your classic one, Attar of Roses, mainly again going back to the scent of foliage. I mean, sometimes you might not even have many flowers in the garden to pick, but if you've got a lovely houseplant or one in a pot, these pellies, they like to be cut. They almost are like cut and come again in terms of their foliage. As long as you take them back down to a pair of leaves, they enjoy that feeling of needing to regrow. If you're going to do that, plant a lovely favourite, it'll become a lovely big thickly bushy plant. Yeah. So cut them for the vase and, take them in a jam jar to a friend at a party, and they can smell them, but then they can do, as Sarah's described, they can then take cuttings off that bit of cut foliage.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're lovely. I mean, what I would say, what I notice with them, particularly when they do come into the house, is they do suffer a bit from the different temperature variations. If you've got a small house, it will take a few weeks for you to find where they're going to be happy for winter. Okay. And I would say don't let them dry out completely. Okay. I prefer to keep them going, and actually I even feed them a little bit through the winter with just a bit of seaweed feed. Now that's probably not what you need to do for all of them, but for a small house I like things to look still a little bit invigorated. When you've got to look at something when you're doing the washing up every day, you don't really want to look at a dead yellowing thing.
Yeah, no, true.
And they also are a little bit, I would say mix into your compost when you're doing your cuttings, lots of grit and actually a fair bit of good horticultural sand as well. They like to feel well drained, and that will keep them happy.
I bet you were taught that at Kew, weren't you?
Yes, I was. One of the few things I remember.
Yeah. So, as I said, each of my top picks remind me of someone, and so I thought I'd talk about that. So my absolute, I love all of these, but anyway, one of my top favourites is a variety which is labelled Hotel Maroc. And the reason for that is it was brought back by Lord and Lady Cavendish, who, having just talked about Chatsworth, it reminded me of it actually. They garden at Hooker Hall in Cumbria, Westmoreland, it used to be called, and I think they brought it back as a cutting in their sponge bag from a hotel in Morocco. And so it's just called Hotel Maroc. Anyway, it's absolutely splendid. It's an ivy leaf variety, not unlike Surcouf, which is one that I've grown for many years here, that came originally from Fibrex Nurseries. And they had a fantastic collection of pelargoniums. But anyway, this has got flowers twice the size of Surcouf. It's just extraordinary. Velvet, rich, magenta pink, absolutely wonderful. And it's already in flower now, and it's been in flower already since the beginning of May, and it goes on flowering until almost Christmas. And so we're actually propagating that in our nursery in Lincolnshire, and we're going to call it Lord Cavendish. We've applied for naming it. And we're pretty sure that it's not a known variety, certainly not in the UK, and it's not a species, so it is a hybrid. But wow, oh wow, is that a stunner. And hopefully we're going to propagate enough of that so it will be available from us very soon. But anyway, regardless, it's rather splendid. So do you have another favourite, Arthur?
I do, and you've got it, because I gave you the plant.
Oh, I was going to come on to that. Is it dragon's breath?
It is.
Oh, I love it.
And it's such a joy, because sometimes it's so nice to get the Sarah Raven catalogue and see things that you've given Sarah appear. I know I'm not the only one who's probably given Sarah plants that appear in the catalogue in a few years. But I got that from Fibrex Nursery. I was actually asked to do a programme for Channel 4 that involved planting up this head of plants. And so I went to Fibrex and bought a load of pelargoniums. It was for that man, the artist, whose name has escaped me. But anyway, I did that, and I never saw this thing again that I planted up, so they probably all died. But anyway, from that visit,
Damien
I did buy a
Hirst,
dragon.
was it?
Damien Hirst, that's...
Okay.
Yes, I think it was, yeah. Yep. So anyway, from that expedition, that job, I got a dragon's breath pelargonium, and I took it to Perch Hill, because I thought it was really beautiful. It's lovely, fiery orange coral flower.
Yeah. Well, it's really scarlety, isn't it? I mean,
with tongues of petals.
Yes.
Not big, but very, very striking. And so I was very pleased to see that as part of the pelargonium collection that you've done this year.
It's a really splendid one because it's compact, but not fussy. You know, quite often, because it's got this sort of crazy, like, dragon's breath. I mean, literally, like, sort of, bong, you can imagine in a sort of children's comic of sort of an explosion. And this incredible scarlet, and very, again, super long flowering, already in flower now in June. And on and on and on it goes. So that was going to be in my list actually as Arthur's inspiration. But I really love that one. And another top favourite of mine, which reminds me of a place in a way rather than a person, which is, I remember driving through the Alps, and the classic ivy-leafed pelargonium window boxes that they have from their balconies and things as you drive from the French into the Swiss Alps and then on into Italy or wherever. And it's a sort of absolutely classic alpine thing to have those ivy-leafed pelargoniums. And they flower and flower and flower. And you get these sort of great trusses cascading down, like you said, like you referred to actually about climbers, like Medusa's snaky head.
Medusa, snaky.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a variety called Tommy that I am particularly obsessed by. And that's because in Switzerland, they're often pinks or whites, and they're quite pastel-y, which I love. But I love Tommy even more because it is cut from the most sumptuous crimson velvet. And it's semi-double. And that's why I think it's so long flowering. I'm not sure it's going to have much forage for the pollinators, but it just flowers and flowers and flowers. These are literally sort of Windsor Castle velvet curtain brocades of pelargonium flowers. And it's easy to grow, incredibly reliable, pretty drought tolerant. It's an absolute stunner. It's a real favourite of mine. So that it just reminds me so much of that sort of Swiss alpine look that I'm fond of it for that reason, really. Any more to finish with?
Just back to a scented, really. I can't leave out Prince of Orange.
Yes.
Such a beautiful tangerine peel scent. And of course the flowers aren't orange. It's a lovely pink, but with then a nice purple throat and bibs and blotches. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned forage for pollinators. What I get annoyed about when I'm walking through London is how all the restaurants have become scared of customers being worried about bees and wasps, so they've got all these horrible plastic things on the tables, haven't they? Yeah. Why they don't think to themselves, oh, let's just do a lovely scented pelargonium. Yeah. Because they may not give much flower, but they'll be living plants. If anyone's listening and maybe it's got a cafe or a restaurant, I would say get yourself some scented pelargoniums. They're happy in small pots. Just keep pinching them out to their bush.
Or basil,
like basil,
like you get in Greece, and just don't let them flower, and then you won't draw the things in.
Yeah, But no, scent from the leaves is the thing for this.
Yeah. So my final one is a variety called Kewensis, and it's actually really quite difficult to find. It's very airy, quite leggy, very elegant, with these really open coral pink butterfly-like flowers. And we had it at Chelsea. So we had it on the stand at Chelsea, and so many people asked about it. And it flowers from May until November or December. And it's quite a nice story in a way, which is that at the end of Chelsea, people love to either buy or be given plants and take them away. And Jemima said to me at the end, can we either sell or give away all our plants?
We were having kittens at the end of all these plants.
Anyway, I said, no, I'm sorry to be so mean, but I want them to come back to Perch because we've created this new building, this greenhouse, and out the back of it, we have made a gravel garden, but we left it too late to put in perennials because we were so busy with Chelsea. So we've ordered things like loads of different cistus, which are drought tolerant, loads of euphorbias, cerinthes, I don't know, lots of different things, rosemaries and stuff, all drought tolerant and good for gravel gardens. But we just left it too late to then not have to water them in meticulously in June and July. So I said, let's bring all the things back from Chelsea and just pile them in there and around the back of the building. And it's east facing. And honestly, Arthur, I'm longing for you to see it because it looks like your flower yard. And the main plant there is a combination of Pelargonium Kewensis with Petunia tidal wave red velour. And if anyone came on our stand at Chelsea, the Petunia tidal wave red velour was extremely prominent on all three corners. Well, obviously we have four, but one's at the back and it was against the marquee, so we only had three corners. And the Petunia tidal wave red velour and Pelargonium Kewensis, wow, how stunning they looked. And they've come straight back here and they're looking just as stunning here. So we have our own mini flower yard, not just in the Dutch yard outside our back door, but now on the east side of the new building of the greenhouse. And I love it. I sit there, Adam and I sit there of an evening with the dogs and have a chat. And it's just a whole new aspect, and it is entirely enhanced by pelargoniums. So I thought that was quite a nice sort of end point to this podcast about, a family that Arthur and I have talked about quite a bit already, but you can never talk too much about pelargoniums, particularly scented leaf varieties like Attar of Roses. And in the podcast notes, we will put the recipe for making our scented leaf Attar of Roses pelargonium cordial, which is with fresh lemon juice. And it is totally delicious. If you love Turkish Delight, you will love pelargonium, rose pelargonium cordial. And it's a great thing to make and to freeze in big batches if you've got plenty that you can pick. So thank you very much, Arthur. Lovely to talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm sure Josie, when she does her garden update, she'll keep telling people how to care for the pelargoniums over the season, because I'm interested to know when Josie starts to bring them all in. So that would be nice to carry on the pelargonium passion.
Excellent. Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cook Eat Arrange with me, Sarah Raven, and my co-host, Arthur Parkinson. Next week, Josie Lewis, our head gardener, and I are back together, and we're going to talk to you more about dahlia breeding and what we've been doing here and our results and failures perhaps, although hopefully there won't be that many of those. So see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.